This is episode 40 of the Home and Family Culture podcast. I'm Jody Chafee, and in this episode, I'm interviewing Linda McGurk of Rain or Shine Mama. Welcome to the Home and Family Culture podcast, where I discuss how families can discover and design their collective vision, values, beliefs, and traditions that influence their family culture. In this podcast, I interview experts who offer tips and tools to inspire families in this process of developing their family culture, and also successful individuals whose success was influenced by their family culture growing up. Be sure to check out the show notes for this and every episode at homeandfamilyculture.com, where you can subscribe for my weekly newsletter filled with updates on the podcast and blog, as well as other tidbits of information I like to add. You can listen to this podcast on iTunes, Spotify, TuneIn Radio, Stitcher, or YouTube. Please subscribe to your favorite medium. You can also find me on social media at Family Culture Podcast on Instagram, Facebook, and Pinterest, and at _Family Culture on Twitter. Be sure to comment, follow, like, rate, and share. But enough about all that. Let's get to the episode. Thank you for listening. Linda McGurk is a Swedish-American journalist and author of the parenting memoir, There's No Such Thing as Bad Weather, A Scandinavian Mom's Secret for Raising Healthy, Resilient, and Confident Kids, From Friluftsliv to Hygge.
Yes, you got it.
Awesome. She believes that the best childhood memories are created outside, while jumping in puddles, digging in dirt, catching bugs, and climbing trees. McGurk blogs about connecting between children and nature at Rain or Shine Mama, and hopes to inspire other parents and caregivers to get outside with their children every day, regardless of the weather. Follow her on Facebook, Pinterest, Instagram, and Twitter. Welcome, Linda. I'm so happy to have you on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited to be here.
I love this topic and this idea. Like we were saying before we started recording here, that, you know, it's not our default so much anymore to make nature a part of our daily lives. And so, you know, it's just our culture that, you know, we get caught up in media, entertainment, or, you know, video games,
right.
or, you know, things like that. And so it's just easy to default to those kinds of things, especially when when it is our norm, that's what our kids like demand almost. And
yes.
so, you know, so it's like hard to break that addiction and try to introduce, you know, more outdoor time. So I want to get more into this, and for starters, I want to talk about your memoir. What inspired you to write about this topic?
So I grew up in Sweden and moved to the States when I was in my 20s, and lived in Montana for a while, which has a very outdoorsy culture. And then I moved to Indiana and had kids there. And that's when it finally struck me how different the culture was and how different the approach to childhood was. Whereas in Sweden, nature is considered like an essential part of a good childhood. It was not stressed as much at all in Indiana, and people had completely different expectations, I think, on the early years, both as far as, you know, not going outside much in the winter goes, and also at preschool being pretty academic and starting very early on with academics, and it seemed to me like free play was just kind of really downgraded, whereas that's in Sweden, free play it's like what little kids are supposed to do with, you know, the most of their time. And here in the US, it seemed like little kids were, you know, a lot more scheduled. And just did not have the kind of free time to play as kids in Sweden. So when that sort of dawned on me, you know, I got the idea for writing this book because I felt like I was in a unique position, having one foot in Swedish culture and Scandinavian culture and the other foot in American culture. So I got the idea already when my first daughter was born about 10 years ago.
So have you seen the difference in the developmentally, you know, how with the Swedish culture being able to spend more time in play and outdoors versus American culture being overscheduled and academic? What are the differences that you've noticed?
Well, for starters, I mean, there are fewer kids who are overweight and obese in Scandinavia. We're seeing less problems with ADHD and mental disorders. Not saying that Scandinavia is free of those problems, but I think there's definitely the statistics kind of support that there's less of that over there. So, and it's just, I think a lot of people really feel like little kids should be outside and playing, and the culture in Scandinavia just supports that. Society supports that in a different way than in the U.S. In the U.S., it's just basically up to the parents because there's just not as much of a support system. So that's the big difference that I noticed early on, because all the preschools in Sweden and the other countries in Scandinavia too, the kids are outside. It's actually mandated by law that they are entitled to outdoor playtime. It's considered that important as part of the curriculum. So that's a big difference right there.
Yeah, that is a huge difference. That's definitely not, it seems like more and more the emphasis is on academics and on, early education and No Child Left Behind, those kinds of things. Where
right. This is just maybe anecdotal, but I also feel like, it's more, I feel like the kids have more choices in Scandinavia, and I feel like that they don't burn out as early.
Mm-hmm.
I see so many kids burning out in high school in the U.S., and I think part of that is due to the fact that, we start so early and push these academics, and, we parade around 4-year-olds who are, taught to read.
Yeah.
And I just can't help but wonder, what's the rush? They're going to get there and with more joy and enjoyment if we just give them more time and let them play because the childhood is so short. They have so little time to just play. I mean, the academics really, that kind of stuff can easily be taught later on, but there are other life skills that they need to be working on and practicing during those early years that, if they miss out on them there, I think it's hard to catch up on those kinds of, soft skills later on.
Totally.
Yeah.
I love that. That's something that I've been studying and emphasizing a lot, is that in the early years, that's when they learn what their worth is and where to put their worth. And this overemphasis in their academic value, they start to put their own worth inside of what that is. And so, but when they are allowed to develop their own identity from a young age, then they can work on their academics, like you said, later on, and it becomes something that becomes an inherent motivation, because they go, I'm a good person. I want to be able to do good, not I'm good at academics. And so, there's only so far that having books marks from a young age can take these kids.
Right.
But having a core value of who they are it carries over in so many ways, in so many areas and aspects of their lives.
And there are other skills, too, that kids learn just by playing outside. I mean, I'm thinking about motor skills, for example, gross motor skills and fine motor skills that really, they are crucial to academic success later on. But a lot of times, I think people don't make that connection. We don't see the link. But, the skill of holding a pencil right and like all those little things, you create the foundation for that when you're outside and you're digging in the dirt and you're picking up sticks and rocks and balancing on logs. And I think research lately has really been catching up to the fact that movement is super important for little kids learning. So what we're seeing in the schools here now in Sweden is that a lot of the schools are trying to incorporate more and more. They have the kids have almost like daily PE and also a lot more breaks as well, recess.
There's so much merit to all of that, to just be able to move and to be able to recover from the pressures of school and things like that at any age, I think. Because it's like, as adults, we don't expect ourselves, I mean, we do have to work all, long hours and things like that. But even adults need a break. We need recovery. We need to be able to just take a breather, and more we need that fresh air, that nature, things like that. I'm sure there are tons of studies out there that are reflecting the value of these things.
Yes, absolutely.
So I love that.
And and I'm thinking about, health-wise too. I mentioned obesity, but another big thing is bone health. In childhood, that's also when you create, you create the foundation for good bone health. And so the kids they need to be outside and moving around. That's just as important.
Wow, so many benefits. And to think that it's something as simple as go outside and have unstructured play or structured play, but even just unstructured play, how easy is that to just go? I think it scares parents, right? To be like, but I need to be constantly structuring their time and their life. But that's counterproductive.
Yeah. And I think it becomes a vicious cycle, because I think kids who are used to being constantly activated or, they start to expect that. So they become unable to create their own fun. So I've always made the conscious choice not to, make activities for my kids all the time. There are times when, if they don't want to go outside, I might, I'll throw out some ideas, and, we might play hide and seek and whatnot. But most of the time, I really just want them to go outside and discover things on their own. I really think that's the most valuable play, because that's when they, they like develop their own games, and like you were talking about earlier, and there are so many skills really that come from that. And I think all the research now is pointing in the direction that, being bored is actually good for kids. It's the catalyst of a lot of creativity and invention. And so I think this unstructured play is just really important, just for kids to help them figure out who they are, and things like problem solving and conflict resolution. If they constantly have an adult there taking care of, or like interfering and sort of getting into or trying to solve all the conflicts that arise, then they don't learn to deal with it on their own. So I do think that the unstructured play is really important. And I think, unfortunately, a lot of parents don't feel like the unstructured play is enough. And I think part of the problem is this push for all activities to be, educational, and that sort of implies that the unstructured play is not educational in itself, which is, nothing could be more wrong.
Yeah.
And it's just too bad that that parents feel the need for everything to be structured, because it really, the kids would benefit more from just playing on their own. They have enough structured activities in their lives.
Yeah, I think that probably stems from parents' own feelings of inadequacy, right? And the pressures the pressures that we get about, having academically minded kids, that there's all that pressure in our culture that if our kids aren't excelling, or if they're not meeting, matching with their age group academically, or things like that, or, there's that pressure to keep up the pace. And so
there's
that's
also, and there's so much information now too that our parents didn't have to deal with. It's just constant on the internet, like how to be, all this advice or all this parenting advice. So of course, it's what do you do? Is I understand that people get confused, because everybody wants to do what's best for their kids. So
Oh, I love all of these things. So you talked about the soft skills that kids can learn from being outside and having unstructured time, the health benefits to their body mass and bone density and things like that. And you talked about being able to be creative and problem solve. These are all major skills. and
Right.
major benefits. And I think too, going back to why possibly you talked about being outdoors, is because the outdoors is this natural playground. Yeah, where there's so much for these kids to do and so much that they can accomplish and explore. And the nature just brings so much peace and energy just being in the nature, would you
Yes.
say? And would you add any more to the mission of like your blog and your message along those lines?
Well, I think just, the reason why I started the blog was that I felt pretty lonely in my parenting experience because I had this notion that, I should take my kids outside and because I had that from my own childhood in Sweden. And I just couldn't really, I didn't find any like-minded people. And then the idea came to me to start a blog and reach out to like-minded people that way. And also to sort of inspire people to get outside with their kids and to some extent educate as well.
Mm-hmm.
Because I know, like I said earlier, I think a lot of people really want their kids to play outside and they know that it's good for them for all these reasons that we mentioned earlier. But somehow they may just not find the time or they don't know how exactly to do it because they, a lot of the younger parents today did not grow up playing outside for hours on end. So they don't have that with them. And there's a bit of a gap there. So I was hoping to kind of help bridge that gap because I just turned 40. So I'm still in that generation that I grew up in a pretty low tech society. And now I'm trying to raise these young kids and in a very high tech world. So part of the blog is being a bit of a bridge between, the younger parenting generation and my own generation.
Yeah, because I think more and more there are people who are recognizing, especially a little bit older, recognizing their childhood was so much freedom and outdoors, but that these younger generations, they didn't experience those things. And so there's a couple of dynamics going on there because it's like, how do we manage all of this tech society, but also how do we get back into our roots of being outside more? And so there's a lot of, there's so much going on there.
There is. And I, just from talking to people, I think from talking to other parents, I feel like the electronics is really one of the biggest challenges that parents today are facing. And I'm getting into it now as well. So my oldest daughter, she's 10 and she just got her own smartphone. And I think it's early, but it's hard as a parent because all her classmates have a phone. Right. So it's really tough because it's like you don't want your kid to be the only one who's like, you don't want her to feel left out. And so I think it's really important to sort of create that foundation of like that solid nature connection early on because the electronics are going to come, they're going to compete, for time. And so I think it's good to delay as long as you think is feasible as a parent. And then also make sure, and I've had pretty strict limits. My girls have had access to tablets. We don't watch much TV at home. And during the school weeks, it's been, we haven't had any screen time, just sort of on the weekends and so forth. But so we've used that time to be outside and sort of forge that connection with nature in the early years so that they will have that strong bond. And actually, I think it's really helping now because, my daughter is super into her phone and, she loves playing games on it and texting her friends and all that. But she's just as happy just going outside and not having a plan and just being able, she still plays, she engages in imaginative play all the time. And she loves just going outside and looking at the clouds and, or just going for nature walks or just lifting a rock up to see what's underneath. I mean, she still has that sense of wonder that really young kids that we're all born with. and which I think is really important for, kids to continue to be creative and so forth. I think we really need to protect that sense of wonder, and especially, in light of all the electronic entertainment, because let's face it, that's the reality we live in today. It's not going to go away. We can't shield our kids forever. We just have a few short years before they get access to all the electronics, and we need to sort of, make the most of those years, I think.
Yeah, I like what you said about setting a foundation, so that they develop those soft skills, they develop those things that we were talking about before. And also it may make it easier as a parent then to be able to establish some boundaries, right, around the electronics, because I think that is also one of the challenges, is setting the boundaries and setting limits, not this unlimited, unfettered, just go out and go ahead and explore whatever you want on the internet. No. But letting them explore and develop a love for themselves and the outdoors and, things like that, helping them. Because more and more, I think that the antidote for the issues and the problems that are going on in the internet and on social media and things like that is creating a sense of identity for our kids that's outside of their virtual identity. Something that can foster their own self-worth and identity and uniqueness and individuality and things like that. And so I can definitely see that laying that foundation for them as that antidote. I love that.
And I think also we need to be mindful of what we're modeling as well. Sometimes I'm the worst offender, and I admit, because I make my livelihood from being, on the internet all the time, and I check my phone, and I always have my phone. But that's why, by setting boundaries for my daughter, I also practice setting boundaries for myself, actually, because I take time out, like in the evening when the kids are home, and that's, I put away my phone. I try to be very mindful about it. So I'm just not casually checking my phone all the time, because, then that's what I'm going to be modeling to my daughter. And I don't want that.
Yeah. I read a book somewhere that said that when you start out the day, it might have been the 5-second rule or something like that. It talked about if you start out in the beginning of the day in your morning looking at social media and things, it sets up your brain for that stimulation and loss of focus. And so the later into your day that you can delay looking at social media and your phone and things, then the more control you have of your thinking, your mind.
That's also really good advice.
Yeah. So that's something that I've been learning myself too, because it has been my habit to before my kids are up, I'll look at my phone, and then the rest of the day I'm it's like this reflex to pick up my phone. I'm like, why do I keep doing this? Oh yeah, because I set myself up to be stimulated all day long. And so I've been trying to break that habit of waiting as long as I can to look at my phone and my email or my whatever, because as soon as you bring that into your mind, it's I told my brother, every morning I give myself a lobotomy because I look at my phone the first thing in the morning. Why do I do this? I need to silence my mind. I need to center myself and get grounded in my own identity and my vision for the day, so that I don't lose sight of that and then go berserk. I just kind of
I think I might just adopt that idea. Actually, that sounds like a really good idea.
Trying to do that. So I want to go more into this idea, Linda, of what is family culture? What does it mean to you? And then afterwards, I want to relate it to our topic.
Right. So I've been thinking quite a bit about family culture since I had my own kids, because I come from a broken family myself, in that my parents got divorced when I was 10. And so it's just that I had a different family. I just didn't have the nuclear family, but we still had family culture.
Yeah.
And I think, to me, family culture is the stories that my kids will tell their kids after I'm gone. That's what I think about. all those little moments that we spend together and that may have seemed, insignificant at the time, but really stick with my kids. When I was little, I did a lot of things with my grandparents, and to this day, every time I'm in Sweden and, I go to some of these places and I smell these smells, and, that just reminds me of my grandparents. And I think that means that I had like a thriving family culture, because also to me, a lot of those memories are, they're from some sort of outdoor activities, because I think we tend to remember outdoor activities a little better than indoor activities, just because we use our senses more outside. Yeah. Our senses get more stimulated. So to me, so in Scandinavia, I think nature is an integral part of family culture. It's friluftsliv that you mentioned earlier on. It is a tradition that is passed on from generation to generation. It's something that you are taught just by doing, early on. And, basically friluftsliv is just about enjoying nature in simple ways. It's not about being out there necessarily doing any like action sports and things like that. It's about the little things, the walks around the neighborhood, where you might find some interesting, an interesting beetle on the way, or, exploring nature in an everyday fashion.
Yeah.
And that's a really important part of family culture in Scandinavia. So it's part of my fabric as well.
I like that. I like the fabric. That's a great way of describing it. It just, those things that weave into your life so that it becomes a part of you, and it's part of the memories and the feelings that you have of your childhood and things. That's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So what does that other word mean? Hygge.
Hygge.
Okay. What does that word mean?
Hygge, I guess it's a Danish word. Mm-hmm. And it loosely translates to, like cozy togetherness. It's all about putting family front and center, doing things that are cozy with your family. I think it originated just with the really dark and long winters here in Scandinavia. It's a way of making the most out of those really short days when you light candles and and also because it rains a lot here, so you cozy up and maybe you gather around the fireplace. And I mean, hygge, it crosses a lot of different aspects of life, even like design and lighting and all sorts of things. And hygge and friluftsliv, they kind of complement each other, I think, because so a lot of things that you would do, when you practice friluftsliv are also considered hygge. So, for example, going outside and, roasting hot dogs over an open fire, for example, that's both, you're out in nature, but it's also hygge. So they overlap a little bit, but I think hygge is maybe a little more associated with wintertime, and I think friluftsliv really shines in the summertime when people are outside more, just because there's more daylight. So, that's cool. But I think both are very integral to family culture.
Yeah. If you're listening from the United States here, we kind of miss out on some of these. We don't really have a word for that feeling you get when you're outside, or, we don't really have a word for that cozy feeling when you're together and snuggled up to a warm blanket. We can all imagine it and we can all feel that. But it's like something that we have to almost intentionally bring into our lives, because it's not necessarily woven into the fabric of our national culture and things like that. And so I think that's something that the reason why I wanted to talk with you more about it is it's like, how can we make it a part of our culture and things like that? And if being outside is so important, why don't more families do this? And what can we do to incorporate it more?
So, that's the $1 million question. I really think that, like I said earlier, a lot of parents really want this for their kids. I think there's just, I think a little bit, part of the problem is a lack of tradition, maybe. that it's not something that gets passed down from generation to generation in the same, in the same way that it does in Scandinavia. And also, I think there are some hurdles that are more, typical maybe of our times than, older Americans tell me that they used to play outside all the time, and they had a lot more freedom to play unsupervised. And when you talk to people today, older Americans, that's they always tell me, well, we were outside from sun up till sundown, more or less. And I think fear is a big part of it. I think there's definitely, people don't feel as secure anymore. They say, well, yeah, of course they did. Of course people could let their kids out in the 60s. It was safe then. It's not safe today. But when you look at the statistics, this fear is not really, it's not really supported in the numbers. But that it's hard to get that through because we're so well informed today. So we know of every little threat.
Right.
And not to, I respect that people worry about their kids. It's natural. It's completely natural. But I also think that the dangers are, a little overblown when you put it in perspective. And so, even in very safe neighborhoods, a lot of kids don't play outside because their parents are just scared of traffic and kidnappers and poison ivy, and you name it. And then I also think that kids are a lot busier today. They lead busier lives. Even young kids have busy schedules, a lot of them, with structured, classes and things like that. And there's a higher expectation on academic performance, and even 4-year-olds get homework today. So that's part of it too. And then and families are just busier as well. So those are big ones. And then electronics, I think, as we discussed earlier, that's a huge one.
So really, it's like how we need to figure out how, just to spread the message. I think too that there are other options. We don't have to pack our lives. We can, that's what I'm trying to, as far as family culture, we have to be intentional to, that even though everybody around us is busying themselves and signing their kids up for so many different things, that if we can visualize what we want for our family and then be intentionally shape our behaviors and activities around that vision and the hope that we have for our families, that there are other options.
I think it's really important to, try to trust your instinct and trust that it's okay to stand back and just let the kids be kids a little longer. I understand that there's a lot of pressure, but really when you look at the Scandinavian cultures and the countries that have been very successful, economically, and people over there are obvious. There's a lot of creativity and innovation that comes out of delaying some of this pressure. So I think just try to reach out, or even you can even find communities online. If you feel like everybody around you is putting pressure on their kids and it's hard to be different, then reach out to groups online, because there are a ton of them.
Well, what I think is really fascinating too is that a lot of this pressure that we have is so unfounded. That it's like the pressure to get into a specific college someday is it's irrelevant anymore. It seems like, if you want to go to some Ivy League school, maybe, but more and more that need, I feel like, is kind of dwindling. We're starting to recognize that kids are suffering because they aren't growing up to have to be adults, really, and because of all that pressure.
No, I just said, I think, we make them grow up a little too fast by doing that. And I think that's doing them a disservice.
Well,
really.
it's counterproductive in the end, because if, like you said, if we're constantly scheduling them, then they come to expect that and things like that. And then they lose on their own executive function to be able to do those things. And then also, as far as higher education goes, there's so many other options that when we are pressuring our kids that they have to get into the right school to get the right, quote unquote, right career path, then that, these days you can make a career of just about anything.
Right. And I think part of it is just, it's in American culture. It is very competitive, for better and for worse. There are definitely some positive aspects of that. I mean, with ingenuity and everything, there's definitely some positives in it. But I think sometimes when it comes to kids, we're too focused on, our kids becoming successful rather than, what if we focus more on them being happy? Like, is that such a bad thing? It's just different priorities.
Yeah.
I think the focus in Scandinavia is more on the kids just being happy.
And I think sometimes people hear that and they go, what does that even mean? Do I need to shelter them? Do I need to, you know what I mean? And so, yes, I agree with you. And I also want to add to it that to teach our kids what they can develop to contribute and give and make an impact. It's happiness not in a sense of self-gratification and things like that. It's happiness in a sense of fulfillment and satisfaction with their lives and their ability to be resilient and have grit to work through things and the creativity and the problem solving, that we already talked about, all of those things lend to that deeper sense of happiness that comes from a fulfillment and satisfaction and contributing something to make an impact on their sphere of influence. And the more they can do that grows that sphere, the more fulfilling it will be. And so there's so many ways that you can accomplish that.
Right. And it's, while we're talking about happiness, I think when we look at the studies today, there's what really worries me is a lot of teenagers today, the mental issues are just skyrocketing among tweens and teens, and it's a real problem. And what researchers believe that this sort of originates in them not being allowed to play enough in childhood, and also not having a feeling of control, like constantly being directed to do certain things and having adults dictating everything. And I think it's a huge problem. So, and also resiliency that you mentioned. Outdoor play really is, I think, one of the best ways to build resiliency. It's absolutely crucial for success later on, the resilience part, I think. It helps with executive function, as you mentioned, as well. And that is the key to success, I think, later on in life, whether you go to, and then it doesn't matter so much whether you go to an Ivy League college or not. I don't think. I think it's being resilient is more important.
Yeah. Well, and more, these people who grow up and make an impact, a lot of them had minimal college education.
Right.
And it's something that I totally advocate for college, but I feel like it needs to be something that is it's not something you go into going, I don't know what I'm going to do with my life, so let me rack up a ton of debt and figure out what I'm doing. No. Right. So anyways, that's a little off topic, but, but it's something that is so important that if these kids are growing up with their confidence, with, control of their lives, to be able to have that internal locus of control going, I have the self-efficacy to be able to manage my life, then they get a sense of their purpose and their purpose in life.
Yes.
And so that's so important.
And purpose goes hand in hand with happiness, I think.
Yes, exactly. One more thing that I wanted to touch on that you had mentioned too is how in Scandinavia, there's this sense of generations perpetuating these values. And that definitely goes back to this family culture idea. And because I think, in the American culture, culture is so individual almost,
Right.
because we've lost touch with our history. We a lot of people, we don't reinforce our generational history and stories and things like that. And so
Right.
I just wanted to bring that up as something that that you said that I really appreciated, because there's something to that if we can perpetuate our identity through our, generations, progenitors, and, our ancestors, that there is real value to that.
Right.
Like,
right.
it's something that outside of the United States is more prevalent, I think, because there's more connection to ancestors and the traditions that get passed down. And so there's totally so much merit to that, and something that we can establish if we do family history work, if we, interview or talk with our ancestors, our parents and our grandparents and things like that, learn those stories that you're talking about, those things to help to reinforce the family culture and things that we want to help our kids to establish. Yeah. So I really like that.
And it's hard to compare to the U.S. in comparison is such a young country,
right?
And also is so vast and diverse. So, it's hard to compare with a small, Sweden has 10 million people and it's been around forever. So there's a lot of old legends and folklore that kind of weaves into the whole friluftsliv thing and the whole obsession with nature. And it goes back centuries and centuries. So it's kind of a different situation, but that also, I think there's an opportunity there for American families to sort of create their own stories and that will get passed on. So
yeah, that's something that there was an article that I like to post and share that talks about that, how it's when you have that sense of identity from your past and where you come from, that creates a more resilience. These kids who know about their history creates a sense of unity about their family and where they come from, and creates a sense of resilience because they know who they are and that they come from something bigger than themselves.
Right.
And so I love that that's a part of your culture and something that you can share with us today.
Yeah.
So that, something we can think more about how we can infuse that and weave that into our family culture as part of, this is a part of who we are and what we can do, and create that intentionally for our families. So I love that. So what are some of your favorite outdoor activities to do?
Yeah, so something that we do often that is pretty easy to do, at least where we live, and that the kids always love is just kind of cooking outside. And I try to make it pretty simple, but we have in our backyard, a little place where we can have like a little fire. Sometimes it's just hot dogs, and sometimes I bring out the Dutch oven and just make something in there. And it's just, there's just something about sitting around the fire. Like I told you earlier with Hygge, it's just cozy, everybody likes a good fire. So that's something that we do quite a bit. And also just the being out in the woods, that's one of the few places where I can really relax and just shut down all the stressors in my life.
Yeah.
So that's something that we do often, just go out in the woods. And then that's kind of on an everyday basis. And then if we talk bigger adventures, because I think it's important to have some bigger trips planned too every year. I think if you have the ability to go on some bigger adventures every year, I think that's great too, because it gives you something to dream about and look forward to, and that too becomes part of your family culture. So we like to go skiing in the wintertime. We all enjoy downhill skiing, and it's really something that the entire family enjoys, which, it's kind of hard to find activities that everybody enjoys equally much. But that's one of them. And so that's, in the wintertime, we do a lot of that. And in the summertime, I'd say camping is our favorite too. There's just no beating sleeping, out in the open air. It's something that everybody in the family enjoys just as much as well.
Awesome. So I love that what you said about the little things, because it helps you to create a habit of presence of mind, mindfulness, and letting go of the chaos and clutter that goes on around us all the time. So crucial. I love that. And then, the big things, that goes back to the stories and things that you're creating,
Yes.
If you have something big to look forward to, then that really reinforces those stories and those feelings that you have of excitement. Yeah. That's part of our family culture and what we do and to look forward to. So I love that.
Right. But if there's one, we talked about the hurdles earlier and, not getting out as much as we'd like to. And so if there's one piece of advice that I always give people who ask me, well, what should we do to get out more? And it is just simply is as simple as just creating a family rhythm by going outside every day. Just kind of try and vow to go outside every day. Even if it's just for 15 minutes, but if you make it part of your rhythm, then the kids also get into the habit of going outside. And that's why I'm so insistent on, going outside in all types of weather is because I want my kids to be used to that. I don't want them to think that, well, we only go outside if it's 70 degrees and sunny, then we would be missing out on a lot of fun. Yeah. If we just ended up inside on the other days. So, I really recommend making that a habit. Yes.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Linda. I love this conversation and everything.
So much fun.
There's so much information. Where can we find you online? What's your URL?
My blog is rainorShineMama.com, and that's mama with 2 M's. And you can also, I use that handle on all social media. You can find me on Twitter, Instagram, Pinterest, Google, all the social media.
Right.
So just look me up and I'll be there.
Perfect. Awesome. Thank you so much. So awesome. Thank you so much, Linda, for so many amazing tips and insights into how important it is to allow our kids space to play outside and to have unstructured time. I want to emphasize the importance of that because I think that in our society, our culture, we think we have to have every minute of our day planned and scheduled, and that if our kids don't have classes or extracurricular activities and things, then they'll get into trouble or they will, not be able to organize themselves or learn as much as they should. But everything does not need to be educational, because a kid's education and their development is in their own minds and in their capacity to process things, and having free time gives them that space. And so I love that message so much. I'm so grateful for Linda and her work and for her message. Again, you can check out her site, rainorShineMama.com, and you can get her book there. And I will also put her book on my list at homeandfamilyculture.com/books. Be sure to go on my website so that you can subscribe to my newsletter. If you're not subscribed yet, I would really appreciate it if you could go and just sign up for my newsletter. I also created a short list of how to create a family vision, and that's included in your subscription. So please go sign up for my newsletter, and please like and share and rate. I really appreciate you listening and for your support of my podcast. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day.